Welcome back, Year 10. This is the second part of your lecture on Poppies by Jane Weir. In this second video, I'll be talking you through the detailed analysis of language, form and structure. As I'm talking you through the poem, I suggest that you make notes, either in pencil or pen, on your copy of the anthology. I will pause and give you time to make notes from the screen, but it's really important that you listen to what I say, pause video when you need to, and make notes as we go. In this dramatic monologue, the mother's memory takes her on a journey, where she seems to be internalising her thoughts while addressing her absent son. So in a dramatic monologue, there's an extended speech from the speaker, and there's an implied listener. And here, this is almost like an address to her absent son. In the opening line, she references Armistice Sunday, which could imply that her son has left to go to war. However, the cause of his departure is left deliberately ambiguous, as she also refers to him wearing a blazer, which we'd normally associate with someone going to school. This ambiguity is important as it enables Weir to address the universal experience of the loss of a child, be it to war, death, leaving home, as they gain their own independence and place in the world. I would avoid talking in your responses about the boy or assuming that we know that the boy is dead, because that ambiguity means that we don't know that fact and we can't evidence it. In the opening stanza, we're also introduced to the idea of touch. Remember, touch and intimacy is one of the big themes and ideas that I talked about in the first video. And we see her displaying her maternal instincts when she pins the poppy on her son and carefully removes cat hairs from his clothes. This maternal care is directly contrasted by Weir's use of lexis related to war and pain. Lexis is a piece of subject terminology that simply means words. Lexis means words, and we're looking at the pattern of the words that she chooses and what that suggests about how the mother feels. We can see the pattern of lexis that relates to war and pain in the words spasm, blockade, and bandaged. Perhaps this lexis reflects the fear that she feels in relation to the situation he is entering, or indeed how emotionally wounded she may feel by his absence. Her desire to maintain a positive and supportive facade to her son is suggested through the juxtaposition of steeled and softening. So if you look in the second stanza, it says, "Steeled the softening of my face." What's suggested from this juxtaposition? Well, it's suggested here that she feels internally conflicted. On the one hand, she's feeling really emotional just due to the thought of him leaving. So potentially her face is starting, or she feels like her face is starting to sort of want to crumple, or possibly she feels like her emotions are starting to show. But because she has this very strong maternal instinct and she wants to protect her son and provide a positive facade, positive face, she represses these emotions and steels the softening of her face, so she is quite strong in her face. Ideas about physical and emotional distance are also revealed in the description of her resisting the impulse to run my fingers through the gelled blackthorns of your hair. Literally, the blackthorns of your hair is describing her inability to run her fingers through her son's hair because it's gelled and it's a bit stiff. That's the literal meaning here of that quotation. But what we're interested in is the metaphorical or the suggested meaning. So on the one hand, we could say that as the son's growing up and he's starting to carry out just small, more mature acts like putting gel in his hair, being concerned about his appearance, there's that sense as he's a teenager of detachment. He's not the little boy that would have run up to her as a small child and played at being Eskimos. And some of you might be able to reflect on that own relationship with your parents as a 15-year-old, as a teenager. Furthermore, it could also allude to the crown of thorns that was placed on Jesus's head during the events leading up to his crucifixion. And this could foreshadow the potential sacrifice the speaker's son could be forced to make, as well as reminding us of his youth and his vulnerability as a young man going to war or leaving home in the near future. As a mother, or indeed any parent, the most basic instinct we have towards children is to protect them from harm and to be a role model for them in their formative years. And we can see this in the second stanza, where she restrains her quite nostalgic desire to play at being Eskimos and, as I said, steals the softening of her face. Her emotional response to her son's departure is further revealed in the textile imagery that Weir employs at the end of stanza 2. Now, let me start by briefly explaining what felt is and how it's made. I'm not an expert here. Felt is a fabric that's made by layers of thinner sort of thread or fibre, being, for example, wool, being compacted and pressed together under pressure. So taking one thin fabric or fibre, pressing it onto the other, until you have a fairly strong fabric that you could use for a hat, for example, or a nice coat. The question is, how does the process of making felt, the concrete process of making felt, relate to the mother's feelings? Because this is a metaphor that she's creating through this textile imagery. My interpretation of this imagery is that the mother is struggling to articulate herself fluidly and clearly, and the mounting anxiety that she feels in anticipation of her son leaving is revealed in her lack of clarity in her speech. She feels that her words are rolled, perhaps they're sort of flowing into one another, and she's not pronouncing each word clearly because she's tripping up over her words as her emotions spill over. Or possibly she feels she can't find the right words, these flattened words, to express how she's really feeling. However, the power of maternal instinct is emphasised at the start of stanza 3 through the use of caesura. Now, if I move on and show you here, in fact, at this point, I'm just going to pause for a minute where I've typed up some key annotations for you. You might want to pause at this point on the video and make some notes in your anthology. Once you've done that, I would like you to complete your first question. This is a PA or analytical paragraph in your books. Pause the video and complete this now. Caesura is a pause in a line of poetry. This could be a space in the line, it could be a full stop, a comma, a semicolon. Generally speaking, a caesura or a piece of caesura slows the pace of the poem and emphasises what comes after the caesura. I've highlighted this in a red circle for you. Slowly melting, full stop, that pause there is the caesura in stanza 3. The caesura on line 18 could emphasise her steadying her nerves. Slowly melting, I was brave. Where she's putting her son's feelings for her own, as she's aware that the opportunities before him hold great mysteries and excitement, as she describes in the simile a treasure chest the world overflowing like a treasure chest. A treasure chest holds mystery, excitement, and opportunity. When we think about treasure, it might be wealth in terms of material wealth, but it could also be the wealth that we gain from knowledge and experience and the joy of that opportunity for young people and for her son. A motif of birds is employed in the second half of the poem. The first, the songbird that the speaker describes, could symbolise her acceptance of her son leaving and pursuing his career and next steps. The second bird, a single dove, leads her to the churchyard walls, where we see her desperate to make some kind of connection with him to compensate for their separation. Her fear for her son's safety manifests itself in physical symptoms within her body, as she describes her stomach busy making tucks, darts, pleats. When you make, for example, a dress or a curtain, and you make tucks and darts, you're drawing material together. You're kind of crunching it together. And I want you to think about this metaphor a bit like if you've ever had butterflies in your stomach, or maybe a tummy ache because you're feeling stressed or anxious. She's feeling stressed and anxious, and so her stomach's sort of folding in on itself, and she has that sort of anxious feeling within herself. Furthermore, in the final two stanzas, the reference to a dove could symbolise the power of her memory as she remembers her son. The dove is often seen as a symbol of peace, and to the early Greeks it symbolised love and devotion to one's family. Does the mother in this final part of the poem really yearn here for peace? And this could be for her son, so peace for her son, but possibly also a sense of peace for herself as she processes her grief and her loss. You might want to pause the video now and make some keynotes from my slide. You now have 2 tasks to complete. That's 2 analytical paragraphs. Please pause the video and complete these in your books. You now have 3 final questions, task 4, task 5 and task 6. Please pause the video and complete these analytical paragraphs in your books. If you want to challenge yourself further and you're aiming for that top grade 7 or 8 or 9, it's important to say something thoughtful about form and structure in your analysis. We've talked about the fact that this poem is a dramatic monologue. What I'd also like you to note is that the poem is written in free verse. Free verse simply means that the poem sounds a bit like natural speech. There isn't a fixed meter or regular beat or regular number of syllables within the line, something like iambic pentameter. There's nothing fixed or regular within each line or within each stanza. The poet isn't adhering to strict patterns around rhyme and meter. And we could say that captures or emulates the continuing thoughts of the mother as her thoughts crowd her mind and she's going through that process of grieving and loss. We could also talk about the frequent use of enjambment, where the lines at various points in the poem roll over, and there's that idea that she's absorbed in her own thoughts and memories, and those thoughts and ideas are spilling from one line to the next. And finally, you could talk about the use of caesura on line 18, which I referenced earlier in the video. To finish off, ensure you've completed all these analytical questions in your books. I've also put an extra challenge question in green, which you might want to complete if you're aiming for a 7 or 8 or 9 or just want to push yourself today. I hope you enjoyed the video today, and we'll see you soon.